Welcome back to Beyond the Feature. I'm Dr. Patrick Jones. Today, we're talking about goal setting, specifically SMART goals, and what it looks like when you take a framework that most people have heard of but rarely fully commit to, and then you actually back it up with the tools that create them, communicate them, track them, and tell the story of what was accomplished. Now, as always, beyondthefeature.com has everything related to it. drpjj21.com is where my site is. You can find more about me, what I'm working on. Go ahead and like this, episode and give it a hype if you're on YouTube. Share it with others. All right, let's start with a few numbers that I think set the stage for why this conversation matters, right? Employees who set clear goals are 14.2 times more likely to feel inspired at work. They're 3.6 times more likely to stay committed to their organization, and they're 6.7 times more likely to feel proud of where they work. Those aren't small differences. Those are the kinds of differences that show up in your retention numbers, your engagement scores, and your culture. And yet, 31% of employees report that their managers fail to set challenging goals for them at all. Not bad goals, no goals. And when employees don't have clear goals, they're not just less motivated, they're also more likely to question whether their work connects to anything that matters. So goal setting isn't just a nice to have management practice, right? It's foundational infrastructure for a functioning team. And like a lot of foundational things, it tends to get underinvested in until the symptoms of not doing it are impossible to ignore. So today's episode is about doing it well. We're going to walk through what SMART goals actually are, because not everybody knows. It's not just an acronym, but the thinking behind each element. And then we're going to talk about where most organizations get it wrong. And then we're going to spend a significant chunk of this episode, because it is Beyond the Feature, talking about the technology side. Because the tools your organization is already using can transform how those goals are created, shared, tracked, measured, and communicated. And most people have no idea about that. All right, so let's get into that acronym. SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. You've probably seen it on a slide some point in your career. Maybe you've been asked to write SMART goals for a performance review. If you're like most people, you've already experienced the version of SMART goals that gets treated as a compliance exercise, where the form gets filled out, goals are written in the right boxes, and then the document gets filed somewhere and nobody looks at it again until the next review cycle. That's not SMART goal setting. That's SMART goal theater, maybe. And the difference between the two is worth understanding, because the theater version wastes everyone's time, while the real version really changes the outcomes. So let's walk through each element and what they're actually asking you to do. Let's start with S, specific. A specific goal answers the question, what exactly are we trying to accomplish? Not improve customer service. Now, not be better at communication. Those are directions, not goals. Specific means something like reduce customer complaint resolution time from 48 hours to 24 hours for our support team. That sentence tells you what's changing, by whom, and by how much. The specificity is what makes the goal actionable, because it gives everyone involved a shared picture of what success looks like. If two people on the same team interpret a goal differently, it's not specific enough. All right, let's go to the next one. M, measurable. This is where a lot of goals fall apart, because no one identified up front how they'd know it was being achieved. A measurable goal has a metric attached to it, a KPI, a number, a percentage, a count, a rating, a date, a deliverable. You can't point to data that tells you whether you're on track. The goal isn't measurable yet. And here's the important item. If the measurement mechanism doesn't exist, building it is part of the goal. If you're setting a goal around customer satisfaction, you don't currently survey customers, hey, That's the first step, is getting that survey in place, because without measurement, better customer satisfaction is just a hope. Now, A, achievable. This is the element that's gotten the most scrutiny in the research. The achievable criteria is meant to ensure goals are realistic and attainable rather than demoralizing. Research has also found that over-anchoring to achievability can produce goals that are so safe they don't inspire anyone. So there's a balance there, right? A leadership IQ study found that employees who set difficult and challenging goals report 34% higher job satisfaction than those with easy ones. So achievable doesn't mean easy. It means grounded in reality while still requiring genuine stretch. The sweet spot, that's a goal that's ambitious enough to be motivating, but realistic enough to be credible. Relevant. A relevant goal connects to something that actually matters, to the individual's role, to the team's priorities, to the organization's strategic direction. This is the element that makes goal setting feel meaningful rather than just bureaucratic. When someone can draw a direct line from their individual goal to the organization's mission or its key priorities, the goal stops being a performance review requirement and starts being a reason to care. And if you can't answer the question, why does this goal matter to the organization? It either isn't relevant or hasn't been communicated well enough to be relevant. And then time-bound. Every goal needs a deadline, because without one, goals have no urgency and no natural checkpoint. We'll get to that eventually, is the death of a goal. A time-bound goal creates accountability. It creates a moment for assessment and creates that opportunity that asks at that moment, did we get there? What did we learn? What comes next? The time component is also what makes progress meaningful. You can only assess whether you're on track if you know when track ends. Kind of like a GPS. You know when you're going to reach your destination. And you assess where you're at along that path based on that time. Now, one note about SMART goals that I think is worth talking about. There was a 2024 study that found SMART goals aren't necessarily more effective than other approaches for creative exploratory work. The goal itself isn't fully known in advance, right? For those contexts, more open-ended goal approaches sometimes work better. SMART goals are the strongest for work that can be clearly defined up front, but it's not the only option. That's most operational work, most project work, most performance work. But it's worth knowing that the framework is not a universal solution for every type of goal in every situation. It's just the most useful general purpose tool that most of the industry uses. Now let's spend a few minutes on the failure patterns. Recognizing them is what creates the motivation to do something different, right? The most consistent mistake is writing goals once and forgetting them. Goals that live in a performance review document and get revisited only at the annual review, those aren't goals, that's history. Research on goal achievement is unambiguous. Regular check-ins, progress updates, and ongoing visibility into how a goal is tracking are what separate goals that get achieved from goals that get written down and drifted away from. The goal isn't the document. The goal is the ongoing commitment, and that commitment has to be maintained through regular engagement with the goal. Now, the second mistake is setting goals in isolation. When an individual's goals are written in a vacuum, without connection to team goals, without awareness of organizational priorities, and without input from the people the work affects, they can be perfectly well-written SMART goals that accomplish nothing meaningfully. The research is clear that employees are far more motivated and committed when they see how their individual goals connect to something larger. That alignment, that individual to team to department to organization, that isn't just an HR framework concept. That's the thing that makes people feel like their work matters. The third mistake is treating measurement as optional. We'll know it when we see it. That's not a measurement strategy. And without measurement, there's no accountability, no early warning when something's off track, no ability to tell the story of what was accomplished at the end of the period. Measurement is uncomfortable sometimes because it makes success and failure visible. But that discomfort is exactly the point. And the fourth mistake, one that's especially relevant to the second half of today's episode, is managing goals in systems that weren't built for it. Email threads, static documents in a shared folder, spreadsheets that one person updates and emails around periodically. Those approaches bury the goal in clutter, make visibility almost impossible, and create enormous friction around check-in process. So when tracking a goal is cumbersome, people stop tracking it. And when they stop tracking it, the goal dies quietly in a document somewhere that nobody's opened since February. Now, let's talk about the technology side of this. This is where Beyond the Feature lives, right? And this is where I think there's a lot of significant opportunity for most organizations that they're currently missing. The tools in your Microsoft 365 environment weren't all designed specifically for smart goal management, but together they form a surprisingly complete infrastructure for every stage of the goal lifecycle: creation, alignment, communication, tracking, measurement, storytelling. Each one of those stages has tools that are probably already in your subscription right now, today, that could be doing far more work than they are. And there's a piece of the Microsoft ecosystem that was specifically built for goal and OKR management. And it has a story that I think is worth telling because it illustrates something important about how you navigate a changing technology landscape. But I'll get to that in a minute. So let's walk through the goal lifecycle and map it to the tools that serve it best. The first stage is creation, actually writing the goal. And this is where AI is starting to make a meaningful difference for people who've always found it hard to translate a vague intention into a well-formed SMART goal. Microsoft Copilot, which is available in Word, Teams, Outlook, in a 365 subscription, right, can help you draft and refine those goals in plain language. You can describe what you're trying to accomplish in conversational terms and ask Copilot to help you structure it as a SMART goal. You can share an existing goal and ask it to identify which elements are missing or underdeveloped. And you can use it to check whether a goal is specific enough, whether the measurement mechanism is clearly defined, whether the time boundary is realistic given the scope of what's being attempted. That kind of real-time thought partnership in the drafting stage is something that used to require a skilled manager or a coach, a consultant. Now it's available to anyone with a Copilot license. OneNote, that's another underused tool for the early stage of goal creation, especially for individual goal development. Its free-form capture makes it a good place to brainstorm before you formalize, jotting down intentions, connecting them to priorities, sketching out what that measurement would look like before the goal is fully formed. The process of thinking through a goal before writing it formally is where a lot of the quality actually gets built. OneNote gives that process a home. For team-level goal alignment, SharePoint is where those connections get made visible. A well-designed SharePoint page that publishes the team's or the department's goals, where it's organized by quarter or by strategic priority, it's clearly labeled, it's accessible to everyone. That creates that shared reference point that makes individual goal alignment possible. When someone can open the team's SharePoint and see the department's 3 priorities for the year, they have what they need to connect their own goals to something meaningful. Without that visibility, alignment is impossible. And then there's Teams. That's where the goal conversation happens. A dedicated Teams channel for goal updates where the team can see each other's progress, ask questions, offer support, and celebrate milestones. That creates the social infrastructure around goal accountability that most organizations don't have. Goals aren't just individual commitments, they're team conversations. And Teams is built exactly for that kind of ongoing structured conversation. Now, the tracking stage is where most organizations fall apart because there's no system and manual tracking is tedious and it doesn't get done consistently. So let's talk about what good tracking infrastructure looks like in 365. SharePoint lists. That's one of the most underused tools for goal tracking that I've come across. You can build a goal tracker as a SharePoint list where there's columns for the goal itself, the owner, the target metric, the current status, the last update date, and a notes field for context. Views let you filter it by department, owner, status, so a manager can see all of their team's goals at once, or filter to just the goals that are at risk. You can set up Power Automate flows that automatically remind goal owners to update their status on a regular cadence. The list is collaborative. Multiple people can update their own entries at the same time. And because it lives in SharePoint, it's accessible to everyone with the right permissions, without anyone having to send an update file around. Then there's Microsoft Planner. Now that's the right tool when goals have task-level actions underneath them. If achieving a goal requires completing a specific set of tasks, Planner lets you build those tasks out, assign them, set due dates, and track completion, all connected to the goal they're serving. The integration between Planner and the broader 365 ecosystem means that task completion in Planner can surface in Teams, can be referenced in Copilot summaries, and can feed directly into progress reporting without manual data collecting. Then there's Power BI. That's where the measurement can become visible at scale. If your goals have quantitative metrics attached, and they should, Power BI can connect directly to those data sources, whether that's a SharePoint list, an Excel file, a CRM system, or any of dozens of other connectors, and display goal progress in real-time dashboards. A manager can open a Power BI dashboard and see at a glance how every team goal is tracking against the target, which ones are on pace, which ones need attention, and where trends are moving in the right or wrong direction. That visibility, without requiring anyone to manually compile a status report every week, is one of the highest value uses of Power BI in an organization. Now, I want to address Microsoft Viva Goals. So it is dedicated goal and OKR management product. It's built specifically for setting objectives, tracking key results, and aligning individual and team goals to organizational strategy. It was generally well designed for that purpose, and it integrated cleanly with Teams, Planner, and lots of other Microsoft tools. Well, Microsoft retired Viva Goals at the end of 2025. So it had lower than expected adoption, and there's a shift towards other AI priorities. So it led to that decision. So if your organization had built its goal management around Viva Goals, now you're kind of in transition. And there are good 365 alternatives available. Or there's other tools like TeamFlex that embed directly in Teams, and it connects to Planner and Outlook as well. So I'm telling you this not to alarm anyone, because I just want to let you know it's a useful illustration of something we should all keep in mind when we build workflows around specific tools. The tools can change. We're not working on tools, right? The principles don't change. So whether you're using Viva Goals or a SharePoint list or a third-party platform, the SMART goal framework, the alignment principles, and the tracking discipline we're talking about today, that's what make any tool work. The tool is the container. The practice is what produces the outcome. Now, one of the most consistently underinvested elements of goal management is communication, and it's probably the most important. Making goals visible beyond the people who set them. And in a 365 environment, there's several ways to do this that most organizations aren't using. Outlook is still where most professional communication happens, hands down. It's the natural vehicle for regular goal updates. A brief, structured email sent on a consistent cadence, not a wall of text, but a clear, here's where we are, here's what changed, and here's what's coming next. That keeps stakeholders informed without requiring a meeting. And as we talked about in one of the earlier podcasts, you have rules. So you can set a rule to where that goes to a folder. And as a manager, you have them, you can review them on a cadence, but it's not cluttering up your inbox. Then there's also the Copilot in Outlook. And that can help you draft those updates consistently, summarize them, or as a manager, review them. Now, for leadership and board level communication, PowerPoint is still the standard, hands down. And here's where the data storytelling episode of this show connects directly to the goals. because a progress update on a goal isn't just a status report. Remember, it's a story. It's telling your data story. The goal was the beginning, the progress is the middle, and the outcome is that conclusion, the end. And when you frame a goal update as a narrative, what we set out to do, what we've encountered along the way, where we are now, and what that means for what comes next, it lands differently than a table of numbers. Remember, a story is 22 more times more likely to be remembered. Now, SharePoint news posts, that's an underused mechanism for organizational goal communication. If your organization's intranet, has a news section, publishing regular goal updates as the news posts keep the broader organization connected to the work that's happening. And that progress is being showed that it's being made. That visibility builds that culture. It helps employees see that the organization's priorities aren't just words on a strategy document. They're things people are actually working on and making progress against because they're being communicated. And now there's Teams, right? Specifically, it's meeting functionality. That's where check-in conversations can happen. A recurring 15-minute goal check-in as a standing Teams meeting, with the goals visible in a shared channel as the agenda, with Copilot generating a meeting summary with action items automatically captured. That creates the cadence that keeps goals alive. The check-in doesn't have to be long. It just has to be regular. And I do that all the time with clients. That regularity is what separates goals that get achieved from goals that get written down and forgotten. Now, the final stage of the goal life cycle is the one that gets the least attention. And it's arguably the most important for building a culture where goal setting means something. And again, we talked about PowerPoint, and that's the storytelling stage. What happened? What did we accomplish? What did we learn? And how do we communicate all of that in a way that honors the effort and informs what comes next? The data you've been collecting throughout the goal period, the metrics in your SharePoint list, the task completion in Planner, the dashboards in Power BI, that's the raw material for the story. And the tools you use to tell it should match the audience. For a team retrospective, Loop works beautifully. A shared Loop workspace where each team member can add their perspective on what was achieved, what worked, what was harder than expected, and what they do differently. That creates a collaborative real-time reflection that lives in one place and can be referenced when the next goal cycle begins. That institutional memory is enormous, and it's valuable and almost never captured in organizations. Now, for stakeholders and leadership, again, a PowerPoint deck built from your Power BI data, narrated with the story arc we talked about in the data storytelling episode. Context, tension, insight, implication. That's the right format. Let me say that again. Context, tension, insight, implication. We set out to reduce onboarding time by 30%. Here's what happened over the quarter. Here's what we learned about where the friction actually lives. And here's what we're recommending as the next goal based on that learning. That's not a status update. That's a story that earns trust and drives decisions. And Copilot can help you assemble this story. If your goal-related data and communications have lived inside 365 throughout the period, Teams, Planner, SharePoint, Outlook, Copilot can summarize all of that activity, identify the themes and milestones, and help you draft that narrative that wraps it all together. The throughput of a goal cycle already captured in your environment becomes the input for the story that closes it out. That complete loop from creation to tracking to communication to storytelling is what makes goal setting a real practice rather than a performance management ritual. And every tool required to run that loop is already available inside most Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Now, SMART goals aren't a new idea, but doing them well with the right specificity, with real management mechanisms, and with genuine alignment to what matters, and with the infrastructure to keep them alive from creation to completion, that's where most organizations still have significant room to grow. They don't realize they have the tools. And here's what I want you to take away from the technology side of this conversation, right? You don't need a dedicated goal management platform to do this well. Tools are already there. Copilot for drafting and refining, SharePoint for publishing and aligning, Teams for communication and check-ins, Planner for task-level accountability, Power BI for measurement and visibility, Loop for retrospectives, PowerPoint and storytelling for the close. That infrastructure it's not the missing piece for most organizations. It's the practice, the commitment to regular check-ins, the discipline of real measurement, the culture of making goals visible rather than private, the habit of closing a goal cycle with a real story of what was accomplished rather than just archiving a document and moving on. So here's your one action for this week. Pick one goal, yours or your team's, that currently lives in a document somewhere and move it to SharePoint. Add the metric, the target date, the status, and a notes field. Share it with people who need to see it and schedule a 15-minute check-in for 2 weeks from now. That's the start of a real goal management practice. Everything else builds from there. Now, if you want to go deeper on any of this, from the Microsoft 365 tools that support it, pretty fluent in that stuff, to building the workflows that make it sustainable, or thinking through how goal communication fits in your broader organizational reporting, that's the stuff I cover through Olympus Academy Press with the books and the work I do specifically with organizations through Audit Solve. So make sure to visit auditsolve.com, check into me, right? Or visit beyondthefeature.com. That's got the information about our podcast. And then there's also my 365 companion series books. Those are available on Amazon, and those were written to provide the feature details about all of these tools and resources we just talked about. Use them to help grow in the apps, right? And of course, on Olympus Academy, I have the courses. They work the same. They're just a different modality. Someone who likes video and interactivity, but the content's similar to the books that are on Amazon. And that's Olympus Academy. Learn.olympusacademy.net. And as always, share this episode with whoever is about to kick off a goal setting cycle. Like this episode, hype it, or whatever it takes to get the word out. This episode is the warm-up that they probably didn't know they needed. All right, I'm Dr. Patrick Jones. Thanks for being here on Beyond the Feature, and we'll see you next time.